We'll be getting started very soon, and I have Lydia joining me. Hi, Lydia.
Hi, Floyd. How's it going today?
Oh, pretty good. It's not raining, so I'm happy about that. It was a little bit rainy early in the week, as you know, but
Yeah.
I'm glad the sun's out. How's your Saturday morning going?
Yeah, I agree. It's super beautiful here in Toronto this morning. I think this picture behind me is a pretty good image of what the season looks right now. The leaves are really starting to change and it's bright and it's sunny and it's nice to have fall in Toronto. It's good.
Amazing. And I see that we have about 130 and climbing people watching us today. So for the folks at home, feel free to head to the chat. Let us know where you're currently watching from. Not like in your house, but where in the world you might be watching us from. You
Yeah,
can throw
sweet.
that into the chat. Oh, Halifax. Amazing. Welcome,
Nice.
Michaela from Halifax. London, Ontario. Milton, Etobicoke. That's just down the street from me. Japan. That's Brighton, or I guess that's super late in Japan. In Beijing, New Hampshire, folks watching from Brazil, Nigeria, Colorado. It's bright and early out in Colorado. I know there's some folks in the UK, in London.
This is awesome.
Hayden from Brunny, or from Fredericton. Sorry, I thought it was. Um, who else? Anus Bay, BC, Vancouver, Edmonton, Charlottetown. Amazing. So I'm seeing lots of Canadians, as well as a good mix of non-Canadian locations. We have Mumbai, India, New Jersey, Massachusetts. If you were watching the earlier session, my colleague Katie is from Massachusetts. Richmond Hill, that's my hometown. Welcome, Parsa. A couple more in Halifax, North York, Stockholm. That's
Wow.
cool.
Very cool.
We have Madrid, Spain, and Michigan as well.
Nice. This is great. It's awesome to see such a mix from across Canada and all around the world.
Amazing. So for today's session, as we're getting set up, a couple things to know. I'm going to go through a presentation talking about how you can apply to the University of Toronto, how you could potentially build a degree within the university program. We'll talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts. I know the earlier session, if you were here for that, was a little more of a general welcome and overview of the university, and this one will be a little more the nuts and bolts, the details that you might be hoping to hear about the application. Now, I see that there is a question in the chat. Let's hold on to our questions. I'm going to give you a lot of information over the course of the next at least half an hour, and then we'll turn it over to your questions. So I know you're eager, you're hoping to get some questions answered, but I might cover some of that information, and then of course we'll turn it over to your questions. Now, when we do get to the questions, keep in mind about partway through you can start submitting those. We'll ask for you to upvote any of the questions that you feel are the most important. We'll start with the most upvoted questions. We do have a limited amount of time, and with 170 people now watching, it can be hard to get to all of those questions. So we might not get to every question. I have a couple colleagues in the chat who might be responding in a text-based format, but we'll try to hold on and get to as many of those questions as we can at the end. Lydia, any parting notes, any parting advice before we get started?
That was great, Floyd. I think just to echo what you said is that when the questions do start rolling in, make sure you take a look if your question has already been asked. We'll be able to best get through questions if you upvote one that rather than kind of retyping it. So we'll do our best to get through all those questions, as Floyd said.
Amazing. And the questions will be in the Q&A tab. So you'll see across the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A, there's a chat. The chat is more for interactions, whereas the Q&A, we can at least track as the questions come in and make sure we're getting to them. Things will get lost in the chat. Now, a couple housekeeping notes before we get started. If you do require closed captioning, there is a CC button at the bottom on that dashboard. Again, you're welcome to turn that on, and a live transcript will come up for that. There were some questions about if the presentation will be sent out. My colleague Laura just responded saying that a recording will be posted after we're done the sessions today. So keep an eye on it in the next week or so. I guess I didn't advance my slide earlier. Oh, too far. So this is what I meant to have up when we were sharing our home locations. So I'm joining you today from the city of Toronto. The city of Toronto and the land on which the University of Toronto operates for thousands of years was the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississauga. And I'm really grateful to have had the opportunity to study and now to work and live here. I'm more towards the west end of the city. It's a really beautiful area that I get to call home. Lydia, any last minutes?
No, I think I'll pass it over to you, Floyd, and we will be in the background as we mentioned to everyone, so we'll be able to take questions after Floyd goes through all the sessions. I'll hand it over to you, Floyd.
Amazing. Thanks, Lydia. So why don't we get started? So if you were here for the earlier session today, if you've started to do a little bit of research into the University of Toronto, I'm sure you found out that we are a university that has multiple campuses. We have 3 incredible campuses that you get to choose from. You get to decide to be a part of. So St. George is our downtown campus. It is the original and founding campus at the University of Toronto. In the east end of the city of Toronto, we have the University of Toronto Scarborough. And in the west, in the city of Mississauga, which is the next city just west of the downtown campus, or the city of Toronto, we have the University of Toronto Mississauga, so the west campus. All 3 will give you the same quality of education, the same access to resources. And when you graduate, they all 3 give you a University of Toronto degree. So each of the 3 campuses offers a distinct environment with unique features, but also that same quality of experience, same quality of degree that you might be looking for. So in doing your research, I think it's important to understand your fit, understand which will give you the best fit for your personality, for the programs and experiences that you might be hoping to get by the end of your 4 years at university. Now, we've talked about the physical places that you might be studying. Let's talk about what you could study at the University of Toronto. We have 5 distinct learning communities for you to choose from across those 3 campuses. They would include things like engineering, architectural and visual studies, kinesiology, and music, which are the 4 smallest communities at the University of Toronto. And these are actually just available at the St. George campus. So these 4 programs, the ones on the left side, or I guess they create kind of the mid-piece there, engineering, architectural and visual studies, kinesiology, and music are the 4 small programs that are only available at the St. George campus. Now, arts, business, and science can actually be found across the 3 campuses at the university. So you'll find programs and communities of students studying arts, business, science at all 3 campuses. So if you're looking to study programs like English or history, biology, commerce, computer science, you'll find those across the arts, science, and businesses at all 3 of our campuses. Now, when you are looking at programs at the University of Toronto, I think it's important to know that we offer a really, really big, a wide variety of programs that are available to students. I talked about the 5 areas that we have available. We have over 700 undergraduate program options for students to choose from when they are studying with us. Now, you're not going to study all 700 of those. You actually won't even study a big fraction of that. You might pick a few programs that you hope to do, that you want to study. And there's a number of ways that students can develop and create their degree at the University of Toronto that you can customize and build into a degree based on your interests and your passions. Now, the most flexibility in programming will come within your arts, business, and sciences. The programs tend to be a little more flexible in what you're able to do and how you're able to pair things together. Programs in engineering, architecture, kinesiology, and music, they tend to be a little more rigid just because they are more specialized in their nature and might have some limitations. Now, when students think about building a degree at the University of Toronto across those 700 program options. We actually have something like 10,000 courses for you to choose from. So there is a lot, again, available for student. For U of T, each course at the University of Toronto is worth either a half credit or a full credit, and a half credit goes the length of a semester or half a year, and a full credit goes the length of a full year. To graduate from the university, students need about 20 credits to graduate altogether. And how you pair those credits up in particular program areas are the degree structures. Now, the three that you're seeing in front of you, a specialist, a major, and a minor, are primarily available in arts, business, and science programs. So the Faculty of Arts and Science, U of T Scarborough, and U of T Mississauga would give you these three options. A specialist is when you get to focus in one particular area of study. So if your interest is in history and you just want to study history, you want to wake up, eat history, breathe history, sleep and dream about history, then a specialist would be a really good fit. All of your programs, all of your courses in that program specifically would be within that area of study. The next one over, a major, is about half of a specialist, and it allows students to split up their degree over two areas that they might want to study. So you could do something called a double major, which you might be quite familiar with. So a double major allows you to focus on two areas. So you could have something like a major in history and a major in biology. Both are within the Faculty of Arts and Science or at U of T Scarborough and U of T Mississauga. And so you can pair them up together. And then lastly, a minor is about a third of your degree. It can be paired with another minor and a major. So if you wanted to study a number of different things like I did, you could do one major and two minors. So for me, I knew I wanted to be a know-it-all. And so I had a major in sociology with a minor in religion and another minor in Indigenous studies. It allowed me to experience a variety of different areas of study, and it still took me the 4 years to complete as it would a student who maybe did a double major or a single specialist. Now, I say all of this to give you an idea of how much flexibility you have. You don't have to decide in high school what you want to major in or what you want to specialize in. That'll actually come later in the year or later in your university career. Now, again, I want to talk a little bit about that flexibility that students have in going into these areas. So students can realistically, you could double major in biochemistry and African studies with a minor in archaeology. And that could lead you towards working in a museum, performing chemical analysis on artifacts, or you could choose to pursue a specialist in economics with a minor in art history, and then work in market research at a commercial art gallery. I was mentioning earlier that the most flexibility is for students in arts, business, and science. Students in engineering can actually pick from 21 certificates and engineering minors, including music performance and artificial intelligence, or they could choose to pursue an arts and science minor. So again, a small piece that you can tack on to your engineering degree. Similarly, students in music, kinesiology, architectural and visual studies can also add to their degrees with majors and minors in the Faculty of Arts and Science. So there are literally thousands of combinations that you could put together for your degree. And it's very possible that you could design a degree that no one has done before, because no one else might have the exact interests in terms of academics that you might have. I think though it's important to take a step back. So there's a lot of flexibility, there's a lot of that choice, but as I was saying earlier, you don't actually decide your majors and minors until the end of your second year. So there's lots of time before you get to decide exactly what majors and minors you might want to go into or what you might want to specialize in. The area that a student applies to from high school is actually called an admission category. So the first step is exploring programs at U of T and then looking at what we call an admission category, which is the broad set of fields like life sciences or humanities, which encompass multiple programs of study, like biochemistry and psychology would be within the life sciences, history and philosophy would be within the humanities. So again, you don't have to declare your specific programs of study until the application stage. You don't have to declare your specific programs of study during the application stage. That's something you would decide in your first year, actually at the end of your first year. So these admission categories, for instance, if you're interested in biology, as I was mentioning, there are terrific options within life sciences across all three of our campuses. If your focus was in forensic science, that is an admission category at the University of Toronto, Mississauga. If you're interested in English, you'll find great options in English and humanities again across all three campuses. But if you wanted to study specifically in journalism, that is an admission category specifically at the University of Toronto, Scarborough. So you'll find as you're doing your research, some admission categories, some programs are available across all three campuses, while others are specific to each particular campus. Now, I'm talking a lot about admission categories, and you're probably wondering, why does an admission category matter at this stage? So when you go into first year, you'll have what's called enrollment priority, or first dibs, first choice for your admission categories, programs, or courses that are introductory for those programs. So if you were going into the humanities, you would have first priority in enrolling on those in those humanities-based courses. If you were going into life sciences, you would have priority in those life science-based courses. This allows you to pick the exact courses that you want for that one particular program area, and kind of gives you that direction. Now, you're not limited to that area of interest. Even after first year, students are able to register in courses in other areas of study. So you might have your target area of study or field of study, but then you can also enroll in courses outside of that. So I was a student in social sciences, in the humanities, and I was able to take one or two courses in geography and in geology, just because I had a couple interests in first year that I was like, maybe I'll try out this class, see if it's something for me. It turned out it wasn't, but it was an opportunity in first year to explore what's out there, and see kind of what else I could do. Now, first year really is that opportunity. It's common for U of T students to discover new passions in that first year. I took sociology just as kind of a whim. It was an optional class I took and realized I really enjoyed it. But sometimes they'll end up informing the majors or minors and specialists that you end up choosing to declare at a later point. So that's how your minors, your majors, your degree kind of comes together, and why it's important to have an idea in what direction you want to go. Students that are applying to U of T don't have to know exactly what program they want to do. So you don't have to know you want to do biochemistry or biology or the difference between the two of them. You would be applying to the life sciences, that larger admission category that gives you a sample or gives you access, to all of those areas of study. And then at the end of your first year is when you declare it. So an admission category is really important in setting you up in the right direction. For students in high school, students that are looking at applying to the university, it's a good idea to have direction, to know what kind of admission category you might want to go into, what area of study you might want to go into, but know that first year has a lot of opportunity and a lot of choice. Now, with programs in engineering and architecture, there are some variances. I should say architecture, music, kinesiology. There are some variances in how the programs are structured, but that's loosely how students can build and craft their degrees at the university. So if that sounds interesting, let's talk a little bit about the application process. Now, the title of the presentation was how you can get here, how you can join us. So for the folks that are looking at applying this year, as you know, the applications are currently open. No stress to apply immediately. There are some timelines that we'll talk about. So why don't we get into the application itself? So for U of T, the application is actually two big steps. The first step is submitting your application, the general biographical application. It's fairly simple. It could take about 15 to 20 minutes to complete. There are no essays, no interviews, no letters of recommendation, no transcripts to be uploaded at that point. We're asking who you are, so your personal biographical information, your academic history, where you're currently going to school, and then of course what you'd like to study with us. So really, really bare bones, really basic in the type of information it's asking students. When you're looking at that initial application, there are two applications that you should be aware of. For students who currently are living outside of Canada and have not studied in Canada ever, and are not applying to any other Ontario university, so it's just U of T, you live outside of Canada and you have never studied in Canada, there's an international specific application. It saves you a few dollars in the application, and it's specific to the University of Toronto. For everyone else, we would use the Ontario University's Application Centre. The Ontario University's Application Centre and this international application ask for the same information. They're just costed a little bit differently because one gives you access to all of the universities in Ontario and the other one is very U of T specific. So if you are studying in Ontario currently, in another province in Canada, and you have previously studied in Canada, it's the OUAC application that you would be using. Now, one question that we get asked often, is, does my citizenship matter in the application process? And does it matter, does it impact which application I can use? Between the OUAC application and the international application, both will ask, what is your status in Canada? Your status is a very small factor in our consideration process. Primarily, admission is based on your system of education. So the curriculum that you're taking, the provincial curriculum, or the country-specific curriculum that you might be taking in the application. Excuse me. So on the OUAC application or on that international application, students can apply to a university up to 3 times. So that means you could apply to U of T up to 3 times. As we know, there are 3 campuses at the University of Toronto, so that could be 3 options. But we also have multiple divisions within the St. George campus. So those faculties that I was talking about earlier, applied science and engineering, architecture, landscape and design, the Faculty of Arts and Science, kinesiology and physical education, music, those 5 plus U of T Mississauga and U of T Scarborough give you 7 choices at the University of Toronto. And of those 7, you could select up to 3. Now, the limit within this is you can only apply once to each of these 7 areas or 7 communities or faculties in the application. Now you're wondering, okay, Floyd, I see the faculties, but I don't see the programs that I want to study or even the admission categories that you talked about earlier. So actually, you'll find those admission categories within each of these program areas or within each of these academic communities or these faculties. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, students don't apply to a specific program. You apply to an admission category. So life sciences would encompass biology, biochemistry, all of that good stuff. And you can actually apply once to each of these areas of study. So here are some examples of how you could spread out those 3 choices if you were choosing to continue and apply 3 times to the University of Toronto. Let's say you have interest in computer science. This is a really hot area of study at the moment. You could apply once to the Faculty of Arts and Science, once to the University of Toronto Mississauga, and once to the University of Toronto Scarborough. Each of these is considered separately, and so you could then receive up to 3 offers from the University of Toronto if you qualify for each of these 3 programs. Continuing another example, let's say you have more artistic interest, you're looking more towards music and performing arts. You could apply to music in the Faculty of Music, you could apply to theater and drama at U of T Mississauga, and you could apply to visual and performing arts at the University of Toronto Scarborough. Now, let's say you have interest in the more applied fields. You could apply once to engineering, you could apply once to architectural and visual studies, and you could apply once to kinesiology. Now, all 3 of these are within the same campus, but they are different faculties or different academic communities, and so that's totally okay in the application. So again, you can select up to 3 as long as they're in one of the 7 different columns that you see on the page. Now, students that are applying to the Faculty of Arts and Science, I know Malika and Katie talked about the colleges earlier, so this is a reminder. You actually get to let us know which college you'd like to be a part of if you were going into the Faculty of Arts and Science, and that college selection or college preference is indicated on the OUAC application. You're letting us know 3 that you'd prefer to be a part of in that application. So that's the first step. letting us know who you are, your biographical information, your contact information, your academic information, and then letting us know which programs you'd like to apply to. Again, no essays, no recommendation letters. And if you're doing a speed run, really, you can do it in about 15 minutes, as long as you have all of that information ready to go. Now, once you submit that OUAC application, you get to the next step, which is the Join U of T portal. And the Join U of T portal is where all of the important pieces of the application, all of the additional documentation would live. It takes about 7, I want to say, business days. So sometimes that could be 2 weeks if you're applying on a Thursday. 7 business days comes up on like Friday, the week after. So just be patient. You will get an acknowledgement email from us, but about 7 business days to get access to the Join U of T portal after you submit on the OUAC. Now, the Join U of T portal, when you log in, you'll see the status of your application. You can see all of the documents that you might need to provide for your application. You'll see the progress of your application as it goes on. So it really is an important hub. And for today, I have a little sneak peek for you to kind of dive into, or for us to dive into. So this is what the dashboard looks like before you log in. Your Join ID or your Join ID are those credentials that you'll get access to access all of your U of T application information. Once you log into that, again, you can only access Join. You can't create a Join ID. You can only access that after you've applied on the OUAC. My system's slowing down a little bit. Let's just see what we're sharing. Great. So you're seeing on the page here the dashboard of what it looks like. Oh, went too far. My apologies. All right. So you're seeing a dashboard of what the login looks like when you enter into the Join U of T portal. So you'll see the status of your application. That's the check status button that you see partway down the page. There's a section to apply for residence. There's information about the scholarship or the awards profile for Canadian students. You'll have it listed on that page as well. So all of the necessary need-to-know information will connect from the Join U of T portal. Oh, there we go. Now, when you hit the check the status of your application button, it'll bring you to this page. So this is what a dashboard would look like for a Canadian student or a Ontario student. I should be quite specific here. So you'll see the programs that were applied to on this side of the page, or the faculties, or the programs, or the admission categories that were applied to. Yes, this is an older screenshot, but it looks exactly the same. And the screenshot that we're looking at, this student was already admitted to the university. So you'll see that they were accepted, and they've accepted their offer. But further down the page, you'll see any required documents. For Canadian or for Ontario students, we're kind of lucky in Ontario in that most of our documentation comes directly from our high school to the university. So there isn't a ton of information that you need to provide. If you're applying to a program with a supplementary application, and we'll get to that, those would be kind of down here in the required document section. And anything that's been sent to us will be listed in the received documents. So let's look at a page for a non-Ontario applicant. So very similar, you'll see that the faculties they've applied to, the admission categories. This is a little bit older, so the choice number doesn't appear anymore. But you'll see a list of the required documents that a student might need to submit. So this student is from Alberta, and we're asking for a self-reported grades form for those students. Some regions of the world will have a self-reported grades form where you can submit a upload of your documents, as well as kind of typing in the marks that you currently have. So this section, kind of further down the page, this student has to provide those documents to upload. So they've already sent a couple in, but let's say they have a new verification report, they have a new transcript that they can send to us. You would click the upload button, which brings you to this page, and it's just a basic upload box, a basic upload dialog box where you can upload a PDF of your transcripts of your academic documentation. Now, as mentioning, some students, Canadian students outside of Ontario, US students, a lot of the major curricula can go in and self-report their grades. So in addition to a copy of your transcripts, you can then plug in all of the marks from your transcripts directly into our system. So that just helps speed up the application process a little bit. So this student, it looks like, would be from Manitoba or Saskatchewan, and they've gone in and submitted all of their grade 11 marks. And you know they're grade 11s because they're under the grade 11 section, and these are all finals from that year. Here's a sample of what their grade 12 marks might look like, and you'll see that there is a drop-down menu where you can submit all of the courses that you're taking. You would go in and hit submit, and you can actually update your self-reported grades form throughout the year as marks become available from your grade 12 year. Now, this is just to highlight that students that are applying to engineering will also have access to the engineering applicant portal. And you'll see the button to the engineering applicant portal here. So this is a secondary portal for engineering students specifically, where they would go in and provide additional information specific for their program. Now, while we are talking about engineering, I think it's important to talk about supplemental applications. The vast majority of programs at U of T are sciences programs, are humanities and social sciences programs. We are only considering your marks. For the programs that you see on the screen, the more specialized programs at the university, these programs ask for additional information in the form of supplemental applications. Supplemental applications can be written responses, they can be short video responses, they could be a statement of interest, or they could be an audition if you're going into something like music or theater and drama. Each of them are trying to get to know you a little bit better as an applicant. They're asking very specific prompts or questions that you're responding to. So it's not just a generic general essay or a request for a resume or a cover letter. These are very specific questions and prompts that students are asked, maybe based on why they might want to go into that program, the experiences that they've had in high school or in their school community outside of high school. All of that stuff might be collected in the supplemental application. Now, again, if you're going into the social sciences, the humanities, life sciences, it's just your marks that we'd be considering, and only the programs on the screen today would have an additional piece that we're collecting. Students whose first language is not English and you haven't studied in Canada for at least 4 years of full-time study would be asked to provide an additional proof of language facility or language proficiency in English. There are a number of these tests or qualifications that you could provide. IELTS, TOEFL, Duolingo are 3 of the more popular ones that we see students submit. We don't have a specific preference for one over the other. So select the one that's the most accessible to you, the one that you're most comfortable with in your preparation. Now, the marks needed to be competitive from year to year will depend on the pool of the applicants. It'll depend on the area of study or the program that you want to go into and how popular that is among students for that year. But generally, students that are admitted to the University of Toronto are in the top third to the top quarter of their class. To see specific requirements for your region of the world, I welcome you to visit us online. uoft.me/requirements will bring you to the requirements page. uoft.me/700 will bring you to all of our program pages. And you'll notice that there are some prerequisite courses. So if you're going into the sciences, if you're going into business, even a math course that includes calculus will be an important piece in the admission process. Additionally, English is always required for all of our programs, so that is a prerequisite course that you need to have as well. Now, offers of admission can be conditional based on your grade 11 or even interim marks from grade 12. So both your grade 11 and your grade 12 marks, your senior and your junior years, are super important in the application process. We consider a student's full profile. However, most of our focus will be on those grade 11 and grade 12 years. When both courses are presented, if let's say grade 11 biology and grade 12 biology are available, we'll place more emphasis on the grade 12 because it's the senior level, the highest level that's been completed. For students outside of a high school, let's say you have some college experience already or university experience and you're hoping to join us, your university and your college experience would then be the senior level that we'd be considering in the application process. Now, I promised earlier that there would be a quick timeline of what the year is going to look like. So for the grade 12s, the seniors in the presentation today, we encourage students to apply in early November. November 7th is that early application date. What that does is it gives you access to our Join U of T portal. It gives you access to all of the required documents that you would need to submit to us, whether they're supplementary or just your academic information. We encourage students to submit that in December because the first time we start looking at files and reviewing files for admission will be in January. The first time we release decisions to students, as you'll see at the end of the timeline, is in February. So we do our first round of decisions in February and then continue March, April, May. If you apply in November, submit your documents in December, that means they're ready to go for us in January. We review it in January. If your marks are strong, you could be admitted in February. The deadline to apply to the University of Toronto when the applications close and close firmly would be January 15th. If you're applying January 15th, we're not able to review your documents until you submit them to us. There is some lag time because there are systems. You have to go and gather your documents from your counselors. You have to work on those supplemental applications. So let's say you apply in January, you submit all of your information in February. The earliest we could potentially respond to you would be in March. So applying earlier just allows you earlier access to all of the information, allows us to start reviewing your files, reviewing everything earlier rather than later. So it only helps your application in the application process. If we see that your marks aren't quite where we need them to be, we'll wait and ask you to provide more information as the year goes on, as more marks become available. Now, a couple of other dates to know. February 1st is the deadline to submit a basic amount of documents. So this would be all of your grade 11 transcripts, so your final marks from grade 11, and a list of grade 12 courses that you're taking, as well as any of those supplementary applications that I mentioned. And then March 31st is the deadline to indicate interest in residence. There's no financial commitment, so no deposit that you need to submit. It just lets us hold a space for you when you're admitted to the university. So you don't have to have an offer in hand. It's almost like making a reservation at a restaurant. You're saying, hey, I will be there, save me a space. And when you get here, you'll have a space in residence for us. Now, a reminder, our offers are conditionals. They start in February and continue all the way until May, and they happen in about monthly rounds. So partway through the month, we'll have a new round of admission. As part of our admission review, every student that applies is automatically considered for our entrance scholarships. In addition to that, Canadian students will have access to the awards profile on their Join U of T portal. This is due February 1st, and it asks for additional information about your clubs, your experiences that you've done outside of the classroom. International students should be aware of the Pearson International Scholarship. This is a large-scale scholarship, one of the largest and prestigious scholarships at the University of Toronto. We have an equivalent for Canadian students called the National Scholarship that just closed for students, or for Canadian students. So we'll be reviewing all of those students for the National as well. And a really good resource to be aware of is the Award Explorer. awardexplorer.utoronto.ca will have all of the scholarships that U of T offers from first year all the way until your fourth year and even into graduate studies. And lastly, I think it's super important to know for Canadian students that U of T actually, the largest amount of funding that we produce or we give out to students is actually need-based funding. So not based on your marks, not based on how you did in high school, but the financial need that you or your family have in accessing an education. So that UTAPS program that you see at the bottom of the screen works alongside OSAP in Ontario and provincial loan programs outside of Ontario to help support students throughout their 4 years of study. So if there's a gap between what your province can provide to you, what your family has available and what you have available, then the university would step in with that UTAPS program. Again, that's only for Canadian students. For international students, you'd have access to any of the other scholarships that might be available. Now, before we turn it over to your questions, and I see there are a few questions kind of milling about in the Q&A, a couple tips. The first one is submit your application and required documents early. It just gives you a longer runway, it gives you time to figure out when you have to provide things, and kind of it gives you that earlier access. Check your email on a regular basis, your Join U of T portal also on a regular basis. A regular basis would be probably 1 to 3 times a week. 1 to 3 times a day is probably too much, not great for your mental health. So some balance in between there would be good. Of course, apply for residence if you are thinking of living on campus or in residence with us. March 31st is the deadline to hold yourself a spot, no financial commitment. And then, of course, continue working hard over the course of the year. It's a long year. We want you to join us. So continue working even after you're admitted to the university so that you can hold on to that conditional offer. And the last thing I guess I'll say is also take a deep breath. The application process is a process, and processes take some time. We will get back to you. It might not be as quickly as you think we should get back to you, but we will get back to you. We'll do our best to be as prompt as we can, but there are some kind of limitations in when we can respond. Now, for students who are studying outside of Canada or who are not Canadian citizens or permanent residents, if you have questions about the immigration process and how all of that comes together, I encourage you to visit the Government of Canada's website in terms of student study permits and student visas, that kind of stuff. We are not allowed to speak specifically about those, but I'll refer you to the government for any additional information you might have. With that, I would love to answer some of the questions that you have about the university.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Floyd. That was a really great presentation, a really great overview of everything everybody needs to know to apply to U of T. We have had lots of questions taking place in the queue, and I thank you everyone for those. I know we've got just a couple of minutes, and our amazing team in the background has been able to answer so many of your questions already. There is kind of one question that keeps coming up, Floyd, that maybe you could go over about extracurriculars, personal statements, letters of recommendation. Our viewers are kind of wondering, where do they include that, or if that's required?
Great question. And for some people, they're relieved when I give my answer, and others are like, but I did so much. So for both. So we don't expect a resume or a cover letter. Recommendation letters we don't read at all. Only the programs that you're seeing on the screen in front of you, I've come back to this slide, require additional information about you. U of T is a big institution. We have some larger programs when it comes to the sciences and social sciences. And so we're able to take students based just on their academics. The programs that you're seeing are the smaller, more specialized programs that need to know a little bit more about you. So we're very deliberate about who we're asking for additional information. So the programs that you're seeing on the screens are the only ones that are asking for additional information. They're specific prompts. They're not general letters of recommendation. And providing things that are not requested on your Join U of T portal can actually slow down the application process, because we have to go in and review the file that you're submitting, if it's valid, if it's something we're asking for, if it's not. So only provide things that are requested. Resumes, reference letters, all of that stuff, recommendation letters are not reviewed in our application. It's just the marks that we're looking for the vast majority of programs. Does that help?
Yeah, I think that's great. That gives a really good overview. And then another area that maybe we could just kind of go over again, because I think there's some more questions about this, is about the early recommended date. How does that impact admission consideration? How does that impact scholarships? Because that's been a question that we're seeing in the Q&A as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. So scholarships, or students are reviewed for scholarships throughout the year. So whether you're applying and are reviewed and admitted earlier, or you're admitted later, you'd be reviewed for our entrance scholarships throughout the application process. So there's no disadvantage to applying earlier rather than later. The November 7th date just gives you access to all of the information that you need to provide to us at an earlier stage. It allows us to know that you're interested in the University of Toronto earlier so that we can review. And realistically, there are human eyes that go over applications, that go over the supplementary applications and make sure all of the information is there. And so you need time. We need the time to go through the applications and kind of do our assessments on that end. So applying earlier gives us a little bit of time, but it also gives you time to figure out what you have to provide to us. So November 7th is that early recommended date. It means that you could receive an offer as early as February. If you're waiting till January, if you kept track of the kind of timelines I was giving, it takes about 7 days, 7 business days to get access to your Join U of T portal. Sometimes that can mean 2 weeks in terms of actual days. So if you're applying January 15th, it's been 2 weeks. So you're getting access to your Join U of T portal almost in February. February 1st is your document deadline. Things happen very quickly, right? At that stage, and we are not able to review you for that very first round of admission. There are lots of offers that go out after the February round, but applying earlier just lets us review you in that very first round. So it's important in that sense. Students applying in January will still be considered for admissions. There are lots of offers that go out after the February round, and there are scholarships in each of the rounds throughout the year.
Perfect. Thanks, Floyd, for that really good overview. We've got, I think, just about 1 minute left, so maybe 1 or 2 questions. This question is from George, wondering about submitting marks from schools both in Ontario and out of province. So how does that work if you've taken courses outside of your home curriculum?
Yeah, great question. So in the OUAC application, they will ask, list all of the high schools that you've studied with, and you would go in and indicate those. So on the Join U of T portal, you'd see a request for your transcripts from outside of Ontario, as well as the marks that we're getting automatically from Ontario or outside of your home region. We asked to see that more as a background, just to have an idea of where you're coming from, where your marks have been. I imagine, George, that you're not studying both Ontario and another province, like one virtually and one in school, that you were enrolled in a different province and then you moved and changed provinces, and now you have two different transcripts. So we'll use the others as they're available. You'll see a request on your Join U of T portal to upload a transcript from that area or from the province.
Great. Thanks, Floyd. And just kind of to close it off as a final question, because you have the timeline slide up, I know we've talked about this a little bit more, but November 7th, once again, is that a firm deadline for early admission? What happens if you apply before or after? Just one more time.
Yeah, so it's an early recommended date. It's not a firm deadline. The deadline to apply, the firm kind of applications closing is January 15th. So if this is the first time you're hearing November 7th and you're panicking, you're okay. It doesn't have to be November 7th. It could be November 15th. It could be December 1st. You have all the way until January. The earlier you do it, the better. But there's no stress if you're doing it now versus in a couple of days from now.
Perfect. Thanks so much. And with that, I think we're just about out of time. So I want to thank Floyd for this awesome presentation, giving such a great overview of how to apply. Also, my colleagues in the background, Katie and Malika, for helping with your questions throughout. And Floyd, I'll pass it back over to you to wrap things up.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Lydia. Before I head out for the day, I just wanted to share one other email address. I know we're going to stick around. I'll answer some of the questions in the chat after we wrap up here. That's an address that'll come directly to all of our admissions inbox or recruitment inboxes, and we'll be happy to respond to any emails that come up. To know what's happening next today, financing your education and talking about scholarships and that kind of stuff at the University of Toronto is coming up at 10:45, and my colleague Leah will be leading that. And here's a quick agenda of what the day is going to look like. So if there are other divisions, other programs that or specific divisions and programs that you're hoping to get to, here's just a brief highlight of that. With that, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful day learning about the University of Toronto, learning about our application, and I hope you have a chance to connect with us either in person or virtually again at some point in the future. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.